Hello and welcome back to The Notebook, a twice weekly show here at Oilers Nation where we break down the NHL rumors and storylines. As always, joined with my two favorite beauties, Cam Lewis and Zach Laing. And boys, Zachary got a new haircut. Looks good. Dude.
I did. Got to debut it yesterday on pre-gaming with Boardsy before the Blues game, which didn't quite go ideal. Hopefully this mullet can bring some good mojo moving forward instead of what happened last night.
Coombsy, no new haircut for you, but the Edmonton Oilers, as Zach just mentioned, they dropped another rough one to the St. Louis Blues last night by a score of 6-3. I ask you guys every single show, so I'll ask again. Is it time to panic?
Yeah, I'm clearly panicking as all my hair disappeared. I'm very worried about. No, jokes aside, I mean, I'll echo what I said last time around, and it's that the Oilers are again going to need a momentum pusher here. I don't think if there was anybody thinking in January or early February they could get by without making a trade with the group they had, I think that's all out the window now. And the bump they got from the coaching change is gone, and they're going to need, just like last year, they got Ekholm, and it turned everything around. The energy shifted. They need that again this time around.
You mentioned the Matthias Ekholm move, so let's talk about this year and the Oilers at the deadline. And it sounds like reportedly the Oilers are making a push to trade for Calgary Flames defenseman Chris Tanev, but Rick Dhaliwal in Vancouver said that the Canucks haven't given up on trying to acquire Chris Tanev from the Flames, which would actually be their third trade with them this season. But the Oilers are making a push. Zach, what are you hearing?
Yeah, exactly that. According to Rick Dhaliwal, who is very in tune with what happens with the Canucks out there in British Columbia, he's saying that the Oilers are making a big push for Tanev here. And it's a really interesting scenario that we could see play out here because, of course, Chris Tanev is a right shot defenseman. And really the spot that the Oilers are probably going to look to upgrade on the right side of their blue line is over top of Cody Ceci. We've seen Vinny Darnay really flourish as a third pairing defenseman, not as a first pairing defenseman with Darnell Nurse.
Found that one out.
Found that one out the hard way, which is totally fine because Vincent Darnay, to me, is like your perfect sixth defenseman. Yep. He's a big guy. He's mean. He can kill penalties. He can block shots. You need somebody like that, and he's got the size to play in the Western Conference. Tanev, we've talked about Tanev on this show before, and I'll say it again. I think he would be a great pickup for this Edmonton Oilers blue line. I don't envision him having the same impact that like Matthias Ekholm did, where Ekholm completely changed the look of this blue line, making Evan Bouchard a lot better. But I think Chris Tanev would provide a significant bump to this team, really help out that Darnell Nurse in that second pairing role. It's a move that I'm still really in favor of.
So, Coombsy, we know the Oilers are interested. I'm sure there's a couple other teams. What are you hearing regarding those other teams?
The Vancouver Canucks remain interested, of course. Chris Tanev started his career there, and then he left to sign with the Calgary Flames in free agency, and that wasn't a move that many people in Vancouver were thrilled about. Nobody was sitting there, the Canucks fans weren't sitting there being like, oh yeah, this is great, Chris Tanev's gone. Players in the team weren't saying that either. It was a disappointing thing for the Canucks, and I think now you're into the fourth year of his 4-year contract that he signed with Calgary, and it looks, hey, the Canucks are having a way better year than anybody ever expected. Why not go ahead and bring back a guy who has gone on deep playoff runs with this team before, who is familiar with a lot of guys in the locker room? And if there was a fit, I mean, Vancouver obviously makes a lot of sense because he's suited up there for 10 years, 514 games. But another team in the Western Conference interested in adding to their blue line is the Dallas Stars, reportedly. And I mean, that's a team who's competing to finish in first place in the Central Division. They could use some help defensively. And the original suggestion, Frank Seravalli reported, I think this was a week or two ago, that the asking price, what the Flames were looking for, was going to be a second-round pick. But given the fact you have Vancouver, Edmonton, Dallas, 3 good teams in the West, all interested in one guy, you have to think that it's probably going to wind up being more as time goes along.
So we talked about the Oilers needing a defensive upgrade. We've talked Tanev, but the Oilers' bottom 6 has not been producing lately for the Edmonton Oilers, and that's starting to pick up steam as well. Of course, there's the perpetual second line, right shot, right wing we've always talked about. Now 3C is getting talked about, Zach. Which of those two would you put as your priority?
Actually, to me, it's the third line right wing spot.
That's best of both worlds.
Yeah, best of both worlds. Kind of a little bit of a mix of the both. To me, I've been thinking about this over the last number of days, and I really feel like the bottom 6 is what needs the boost here. You know, we take a look at the Oilers' top 6, your top line of, you know, Zach Hyman, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Connor McDavid. They've stayed together until today, actually. The lines got mixed up a little bit at practice, so we'll see some different looks there. But this Oilers top six has no problem scoring goals. And we've got 5 guys up there in that top line that I mentioned before, as well as Evander Kane and Leon Draisaitl, who are your mainstays. And yes, that second line right wing spot's kind of been a revolving door that nobody's really been able to stick with. You've seen Dylan Holloway yesterday. You saw Warren Fogle earlier this year. You've seen Corey Perry. You've seen Connor Brown. You've seen Matthias Janmark for a game or two. To me, this third line is really where the scoring needs to be addressed, because if you take a look at Ryan McLeod and Warren Fogel's numbers, they're excellent at driving play. They control the pace of play, no problem. They outshoot, they out-attempt, they have the expected goal share, they dominate, they get tons of scoring chances. But when they're on the ice together this season away from Leon Draisaitl, they're scoring only 0.63 goals for per hour. There is no offense coming from McLeod and Fogle in terms of actual goal scoring. And that is a real issue for me. I think this bottom 6 is what really needs this boost, because if we take a look at a team like the Vegas Golden Knights, for example, when they're fully healthy, they've got a guy like Nick Waugh in their bottom 6 who really helps them drive offense and score goals and produce points. The Oilers need that depth scoring here in the playoffs this season. It was something that really plagued them last year. I think that's the spot that beyond the second pair right shot defenseman, that bottom 6 needs a scoring boost.
Cumsy, would you agree with that?
I think that's definitely well said. One other thing to consider is that the Oilers were going to get to a spot. It happened here with Jay Woodcroft in the previous regime, and it's going to happen with Chris Knoblauch. The team's going to go on a bit of a skid at some point, and he's going to lean into uniting Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl on the same line. Either, from the opening face-off they go, and that's the main line for the whole game, or, it's something we just see in the third period. And if that's going to be the case, then there's got to be center depth in the team, because inevitably what happens is you usually move Nugent Hopkins off of the left wing and then down to the second line, plays center. And I mean, he does a fine job there, but he's a better winger than
he's just not a center in my opinion anymore. He's a great winger.
Yeah, he's at this point in his career become a good two-way left winger as opposed to the two-way center. And for the Oilers, then maybe a name like Adam Henrique from the Anaheim Ducks might be one of the better pivots available. Another name that gets thrown out there is Nick Dowd of the Washington Capitals, but that's just not really the second line center you're going to be looking for. The Oilers could use a center, and I think that would give then the coaching staff the option to unite McDavid, Draisaitl. It's not ideal. I'm not a big fan of it. I like it when they have as deep of a lineup as possible, but we know it's going to happen at some point. So give the coaching staff as many centers as possible so they can make that work.
So we'll put a pin in the center talk for right now. We talk about needing a scoring winger, ideally a right-handed winger. And his name's come up quite a bit lately. It's everyone's favorite former Oiler, Jordan Eberly. Frank Seravalli on Daily Faceoff Matchmaker. He suggested the Oilers could acquire Jordan Eberly for Raph Lavoie, a first-round pick, and also Matthias Janmark and a 4th to Chicago for them to launder the money, retain the money, whatever word you want to use. And I'll be honest with the Oilers, now that Jake Gensel's hurt, sounds like 4 weeks, he's going to be out past the deadline. Jordan Eberly might be their best option. Cumsy, what do you think about that?
I've always been in favor of this one. I was disappointed when they moved Jordan Eberly in the first place. I understand why they did the trade, the salary cap situation they were in after the 2017 playoffs, but looking back at the Peter Chiarelli era, that was a reactionary movie. Jordan Eberly had one bad playoff run with the team in 16-17, and it kind of...
He was the scapegoat.
Yeah, he was 100% the scapegoat. It decimated his value here, and they made a trade. I don't think it was an ideal one, and since then, he's been a member of New York Islanders teams that have gone on deep playoff runs, scored some clutch goals for them. He helped the Seattle Kraken reach the playoffs for the first time in team history. Their second season in the league, he's been an important leader on that team. Jordan Eberly, over his NHL career, has scored 292 NHL goals. We've seen a lot of them, and I mean, this is a player who also got a reputation early in his career for being someone who's clutch. Remember, I mean, it doesn't really matter that much. It's the World Juniors. But
can you believe it?
Exactly.
What a goal.
The goal with the hilarious Pierre Maguire call and everything.
Yes, I can. It's
Exactly.
the worst. It's the worst.
So, yeah, like early in his career, he got the reputation of being a clutch player, had that one terrible playoff run in Edmonton, got booted out the door. And I think it'd be great for Eberly to come back and have an opportunity to come up clutch for the team. Like we always talked about, he was, the E in hope, come around full circle now that he's 34 years old or 33 or whatever it is. And that'd be a great storyline.
I still have a poster in my house that's Hope. Hall Omark PRV Eberly, baby. Can't spell hope without him. But Zach, we know Ebs looks great in orange and blue. So my first question is, what jersey number would he now wear? And B, are you interested in an Ebs reuniting?
Yeah, I absolutely am. Like, obviously, his number 14 that he used to wear in Edmonton is a little hold up here
He
now.
can't wear 7.
Can't wear 7. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. But you know what? At the end of the day, Jordan Eberly is a guy who has been a significant playoff performer. If you take a look at his numbers since he left the Edmonton Oilers in the regular season, he's averaged 0.63 points per game. In the playoffs since he left Edmonton, 0.71 points per game. So his production ticks up, his physical play hits up, and people were giving me slack on Twitter this week for saying, oh, well, Jordan Eberly's hits per game goes from only half a hit to a hit in the playoffs. But at the end of the day, that's still doubling his physical production, whether it's half a hit to a hit, 2 hits to 3 hits, whatever it is, it's an increase, and that's notable. Jordan Eberly is a guy who has been a dynamic playmaker ever since he left Edmonton. When he was in Edmonton, he continues to produce wherever he goes. And I don't see that changing if he was to return to the Edmonton Oilers here. I think everybody's got to forget everything that they know about Jordan Eberly, forget everything from that playoff run that was absolutely abysmal and has very clearly been an outlier because since he's left Edmonton in the playoffs and games with the Islanders and with the Seattle Kraken, 45 points in 63 games played. He is not the Jordan Eberly of 2017. He's a much older, much more mature player who understands how to play the game in the playoffs now. And I think that's something that would be a huge boost to this Edmonton Oilers team. Whether he plays on the second line, like Frank Seravalli kind of was suggesting in that matchmaker, or he plays on the third line, maybe he's the guy who can help provide some of that offense to Ryan McLeod and Warren Fogle. I think Eberly would be an excellent pickup. But the thing that kind of becomes interesting is because, you know, as you mentioned, Coombsy, like what happens with the bidding war with Chris Tanev? If the Oilers have to give up a first-round pick for Tanev, well, that might take them out of the sweepstakes a little bit for Jordan Eberly. Maybe they have to have Philip Broberg get a trade either for Tanev or for Jordan Eberly as sort of a first-round pick equivalent to help get one of those deals done.
I feel like I have this year's first and next year's first all on the table, but if I'm involving next year's, I need a guy with term, someone who could hang around. Thanks for that one, Frank Seravalli. It was a good image in my head of an Eberly reunion. Also on Matchmaker, he had the Dallas Stars acquiring Chris Tanev for a second-round pick that could turn into a first-round pick if Dallas made the Western Conference Final. Once again, these are just projected trades in Frank's head. He also had the Avalanche acquiring Jake Gensel. Well, I don't think that one's going to be able to happen anymore. What are the other scoring wingers? Like if the Avalanche were looking to add a scoring winger like Gensel, he's off the market now. Who else are you hearing, Coombsy? Could be an option. Is there many?
It's not a, it looks like a market that's going to favor more the selling teams. I mean, I pointed this out last time, but I think the Western Conference, you can see there being 6 teams where it looks like they're real contenders: Dallas, Colorado, Winnipeg in the Central, then Vancouver, Vegas, and Edmonton. Maybe LA, depending on how they do with the coaching change. But there's a big messy middle in there. You have, you know, the Kings, the Kraken, the Flames. They've done some selling. And then St. Louis, we just saw them. They looked solid. The Nashville Predators, decent. The Arizona Coyotes had a good start. The Minnesota Wild have been good since firing their coach. There's a lot of teams kind of half and half there. Same thing out east as well. Like there's a big middle ground of teams that could make a nice run in February, March, and wind up in a playoff spot. So the market hasn't really necessarily like completely come into fruition. There's lots of names we have heard, especially those Calgary Flames names, because it seems like they were comfortable making their sales well before the deadline for whatever reason. And I mean, I guess we'll just get a better picture of that as this month goes along.
One GM who's not going to be involved with the NHL trade deadline is the Blue Jackets' former GM at Jarmo Kekalainen, as he has recently been fired and let go. He led the Blue Jackets for a very, very, very long time. I was astounded at his career record as the GM for this team, but they went 16, 26, and 10, very likely to miss the playoffs for the 4th year in a row. But Zachary, the Oilers and Blue Jackets all season have had talks with trades. We've had scouts in Columbus, Columbus scouts in Edmonton. Now, without Jarmo still manning the ship, do you think there's a possibility the Oilers and Jackets get something done?
Well, it's a great question, and I kind of think it might be a little bit more difficult to do that. I think earlier this year, you know, when all the goaltending stuff was going on, I do think that there might have been some conversations between the two sides about a Jack Campbell for Elvis Merzlikins swap. You know, Jack Campbell, his goaltending coach in the offseason is Manny Legacy, who is the Columbus Blue Jackets goaltending coach. And Manny Legacy went down to Bakersfield and worked with Jack Campbell a little bit when he arrived down there. And it really seems to have helped him because Campbell really turned his game around down in Bakersfield. And he's been a great goaltender down there for him, playing alongside Olivier Rodrigue. They've kind of been splitting the games. And now we're going to kind of see what happens here, I guess. There was a quote the other day from their their president of hockey operations, John Davidson, kind of saying that, Boone Jenner is a guy that's going to be staying here. We want Boone Jenner to stay. And I know Tyler Yaremchuk has been banging the Boone Jenner drum a little bit. I still think he'd be a good option, but it really does kind of change what could happen here in terms of what the Blue Jackets look to do with this trade deadline. You look at Jarmo Kekalainen, and his track record in Columbus was really awful. I mean, he tried to make some big swings and make some big signings. Obviously, the Johnny Gaudreau one is the largest one that he made, signing Gaudreau to a $9.75 million cap hit. Some of his bigger deals, too, Zach Werenski, $9.5 million. Laing, 8.7. Laing, 7.5. Bobrovsky, 7.5. Brandon Saad, $6 million. Cam Atkinson, almost $6 million. Brandon Dubinsky, almost $6 million. These are a lot of guys who were just never and haven't been great for the Blue Jackets the way they've needed to. So it's no surprise that Kekalainen's been gone or is gone now. Honestly, probably overstayed his welcome there in Columbus, to be totally honest.
I was stunned when I looked up and saw he was at the helm for 11 seasons in Columbus. I can really remember one playoff victory over the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yep.
He had a good run, right, Coombs? He had a good run. Pour one out for our guy.
I mean, if we're looking in the greater context of the Columbus Blue Jackets, then Jarmo Kekalainen is by far the best
greatest of all time.
Yeah, I think he's one up Scott Housen on that list for having the one playoff series victory in team history. Yeah, I mean, you look back to 2018-19 and the Blue Jackets pulled off that incredible, shocking upset sweep over the Tampa Bay Lightning, who had like twice as many points as them in the standings. But the crux of that playoff run was them not trading away Artemi Panarin or Sergei Bobrovsky, and then both those guys left in free agency. And since then, the only thing the Blue Jackets have done is they beat the Leafs in the bubble tournament in the summer during the COVID year, and then haven't made the playoffs in 4 years since. Like Zach said, the guys they've brought in to kind of replace what they lost and those stars leaving for New York and Florida. Patrick Laine hasn't worked out at all. Johnny Gaudreau hasn't worked out at all in Columbus. You have to wonder if he'd like a mulligan on that decision. The only success the Blue Jackets have really ever had was when John Tortorella was the coach, and then it seems like they kind of tried to re-emulate that this year with Mike Babcock, and that just completely blew up in their face. It honestly seemed to me, as soon as that Babcock thing happened and it went the way that it did, that there would probably be a leadership change in Columbus. And it's kind of shocking that it took until mid-February. Yeah,
that's true. So final point here I want to get, Zach. I'd be doing the fans a disservice if we didn't get the rumor mill spinning just a little bit more. We're talking about possible wingers for the Edmonton Oilers. Give me some names. Give me some options that you could see maybe out of the blue that people aren't talking about, or some people are talking about.
Yeah, there's a couple of names that jump out to me. And TSN did their trade bait list back on Valentine's Day a couple days earlier this week. They had a couple of high-scoring wingers that are kind of some options for teams. Pavel Buchnevich of the St. Louis Blues, he came in at number 15 on their list. I think he's a guy who would definitely be of interest to the Edmonton Oilers. Bordsy, as you mentioned, maybe next year's first-round pick, because Buchnevich has a year left after this year, $5.8 million. Vladimir Tarasenko, he's a guy who could be an option as well out of Ottawa. He's been providing some real solid depth scoring for them this year and has done so for the last two, really. Anthony Mantha from Washington, 26 points, 29 games this year. He's kind of a depth guy, but again, he's got a huge cap hit, $5.7 million. So that's a really tough one to kind of swallow there. And lastly, another name that's kind of interesting, and I could see this guy climbing up some trade lists here, Riley Smith of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, he joined them the other year, and he's been a solid player for them. He's producing some offense for them in their top six, but with Gensel now being hurt, that's a huge piece that they're going to be missing this season, because he had 51 points in 49 games before this injury here. So, I almost wonder if Riley Smith is a guy who starts to become an option for some of these teams who are looking to add a little bit of offense on their wing.
Coombsy, out of those four names right there, Buchnevich, Tarasenko, Mantha, Riley Smith, pick one.
It's got to be Buchnevich for me, though. I do like the Riley Smith idea. Well, you guys were kind of going through names. The one that I sort of landed on, I'm looking at impending free agents, and one situation I'm really interested in is Steven Stamkos is sitting here without an extension, set to become a free agent next year. And the Tampa Bay Lightning, I don't know if they're still in their prime. I don't think they would go ahead and trade Steven Stamkos at this point, given you have Nikita Kucherov having the season that he is, but something to monitor, something interesting to look at.
Boys, I appreciate you. It's always awesome talking it out here in this room. I feel like I get educated as well. Be sure to check out all these two boys' articles on Oilersnation.com. You can check me out on this YouTube channel all the time. We're hanging out. And boys, little programming note, we won't have our new notebook on Tuesday because I will be flying back from Arizona. So how about Wednesday? Does Wednesday work for the boys?
I think we can make Wednesday work.
We'll make Wednesday work. Thanks for that, boys. Thank you to the viewers. Shout out to Eli, our intern who puts this stuff together. And we'll catch you next week. Hopefully I have a tan by then.